Hi, and welcome to Politics in a Movie with your hosts, Doug and Mike. I'm Doug.
And this is Mike.
And this week's episode, the 1992 presidential election and Mission Impossible 3. All right, well, before we start, as always, I'd like to thank our tech guy extraordinaire, Frenchie.
Hi, Frenchie. Comment ça va?
Bonjour, Frenchie. All right, so I guess, Mike, why don't we jump right into your segment with the 92 presidential election?
Yes, so the 1992 presidential election. This was the election between George Herbert Walker Bush and William Jefferson Clinton, Bill Clinton. And there was a third candidate, Ross Perot, who also ran and got a considerable amount, perhaps one of the most, if not the most, that an independent candidate ever received in an election. Maybe Frenchie could check that. But anyway, this marked the end of the Reagan-Bush period, 12 years from 1980, where Reagan and Bush won the presidency and vice presidency. And then in 1988, George Herbert Walker Bush, we also call him Bush Sr., he won election on his own. So he was a one-term president. It also marks the end of sort of a GOP Republican era. Since 1968, when Nixon won his term as president, there was about 24 years, except for the brief interlude of Carter's Democratic presidency, where we had the White House was a Republican run. Oh. So that's a pretty long time.
Yeah. That is a long time. And you mentioned Ross Perot. I vaguely remember him. Was he short with big ears?
I think that's the guy, yeah. Yeah, he was a billionaire, ran a big corporation. He was from Texas. He had a good run, and he was leading, or he was doing well in the polls, and he backed out of the election in July. He took a break. And they think that hurt that he might have done even better had he not taken that break. But he got, almost 19% of the vote. And, that was pretty significant, I think, as history goes for a third candidate.
Right. And who would you say that he may have pulled votes away from?
Well, I think that people might say that he was more of a conservative.
Right.
Probably hurt Bush.
Okay.
But yeah, so this was the end of the Reagan-Bush era, end of a Republican-dominated era in the White House. It was a pretty exciting election considering the number of candidates that ran in the primaries. The Democrats had a full book of candidates. They had Jerry Brown, the governor of California, was running. Bob Kerrey, senator from Nebraska, famous for, at the time or earlier, dating movie star Deborah Winger.
Right.
Tom Harkin, he had been governor of Iowa, so he did very well in the Iowa caucus, which is important because it's the first primary contest. And Doug Wilder of Virginia, significant because he's a person of color.
Right. Well, I would vote for him just for his first name.
There you go. He was a Doug. I don't know how many Dougs there have ever been run for president.
There needs to be more, honestly.
So it was a pretty full group running in the Democratic primary, and Clinton, of course, who was governor of Arkansas, and it's a very small state. I mean, I think there was like only 1 million people in Arkansas in 1992.
Wow.
The Clintons will say in Arkansas, everybody knew everybody.
Right.
So it was just that small a state. And so he was considered a long shot. I think I mentioned it when we talked about the 88 election. In 92, there was a lot of buzz about Bill Clinton. And I remember at the time, I myself, the young man that I was, and naive perhaps, I thought, who is this guy? He's from, we found out a lot about Bill Clinton. But at the time, I think a lot of folks were like, who is this guy? Arkansas? How do you pronounce that?
Right. Yes.
So yeah, there was a full group running on the Democratic side, and on the Republican side, of course, George Herbert Walker Bush Sr. was running for re-election, and he had done one term. A lot of people felt this was his first chance to stand on his own. He was really the second guy on the ticket with Reagan very popular, Reagan. This was Bush's first opportunity to stand alone. And some people were angry at him because he was perceived to have reneged on his no new taxes pledge.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was famous for making that statement.
Read my lips.
Yeah.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
So Bush had one opponent, Pat Buchanan, that we talked about earlier.
Right.
That he's maybe stuck his toe in the water in 1988 and his name was mentioned. But in 1992, he was in it. And he actually did very well in the New Hampshire primary. He made a good showing and it gave Bush a trial that he had to go through in the primary before he got to the general.
Right. So, and I guess that at that point, he was really the strict conservative on the ticket.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yes. Results of the election were Clinton came away with 43% of the vote, and Bush had 37.5%. Perot got 18.9%. Yeah, and so that's still considered the best the third candidate has done.
Yeah, that is impressive. And I think one of the things that sticks in my head back in that time was how Bill Clinton really used the media to his advantage.
He did.
I remember. He showed up on the Arsenio Hall show.
Arsenio Hall, presidential candidate, Governor Bill Clinton.
With sunglasses, and he played,
saxophone.
The saxophone, right? He got up on the stage with sunglasses and played the saxophone. Yeah. I mean, that was really unheard of, until that point.
It was considered a new generation. I mean, he and Hillary. It's hard for people to think of that today, perhaps. They were considered, the youngsters, and he chose Al Gore as his running mate.
Right.
That was considered, usually candidates will choose someone from a different part of the country, someone who brings something different. And Al Gore and Bill Clinton were both Southern white guys around the same age, But I think it wasn't a bad choice. I mean, they were considered the young guns coming up and a new generation, and their wives, Hillary and then Tipper Gore, they'd go around together, the four of them, and campaign.
Yeah, and I think, when Al Gore being vice president, I seem to recall, I don't know if it's one of the rare circumstances, but, he was a vice president who had some substance behind him. He wasn't just hitting the road and, just making generic speeches to support the president. I mean, he had, a lot of thought behind what he would do.
Yeah. He was a part of the team and in on the decision making, and he was out there. And as a senator, prior senator, he was a good guy to have on the Hill to help to move legislation. And at the time, Clinton was very big on moving health care, and that was the beginning of getting universal health coverage to people.
Right. Yeah. And then I think, in my memory, one of the big things that, the whole Clinton administration was known for was how the economy really boomed during those 8 years.
Yeah, that was a help. Helped him win a re-election. Yeah. So I brought it up earlier, but the vice president, he, of course, chose Al Gore, a senator from Tennessee, well-known, well-regarded. And then Bush, for the first time, had to choose a vice president, and he chose Dan Quayle, senator from Indiana.
Right.
I think Bush's idea was to choose a young guy. He had these, Bill Clinton and Al Gore, a couple young guys that he was running against, and Quayle. I think George Bush thought that Quayle echoed sort of a John F. Kennedy. That's what he thought. And Lloyd Benson, back in '88, when Bush first ran, Lloyd Benson, who was Dukakis' VP, said, sir, you are no Jack Kennedy.
I served with Jack Kennedy. I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
This was, 92. This was Bush and Quayle running for re-election because they were the incumbents. So, and then for Ross Perot, this was another storyline. He had to choose a vice president too, and he chose Admiral Stockdale.
Huh. He
caused a moment when he had his debate, and he said, "Who am I?" It was sort of a rhetorical question, sort of introducing himself. Who am I? I'm Admiral Stockdale, but
Right.
it ended up looking like he didn't know who he was. So
I know nothing. Nothing.
Yeah, I don't even remember that fellow's name.
Yeah, Admiral.
Oh, I guess that's quite apropos, him saying, "Who am I?" Because I have no idea. Yeah, I guess that was Ross Perot's thing. Listen, I'm not a politician, and so that's good. And but I'm going to need someone who does understand politics. So here's this general.
Right.
And so, I think Clinton had a pretty good run with his, he had a few controversies at the time, which seemed to be really big deals back then. But I mean, today they're kind of laughable, right?
Well, during the election, you might remember the 60 Minutes interview that he did with Hillary. Yeah, there had been some stories about, extramarital dalliances.
Right.
And Bill and Hillary did an interview with 60 Minutes. And during the interview, some lighting fell, like on the set.
Really?
Like there was like a moment where Bill was concerned about Hillary's, safety, and he went and, they were like, it was all captured, and I think it helped them. It helped any concern that people had about, their marriage or whatever.
Right.
It was like live, and it was not rehearsed. It didn't seem to be rehearsed.
Oh,
so
okay.
It actually benefited him, this moment, the 60 Minutes moment. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, that's a good test for potential candidates. If something happens, do they just, run away and leave their wife to get hit by something, or do they push someone else in front of the danger?
No, it was real. I remember it. It was a very real moment, and there was genuine. I mean, they are a married couple, and it was a scary moment for them. I mean, when you see it, didn't look good. These four CBS,
right? Yeah,
equipment was falling on their guests.
Yeah. So I really think that would be a good test to have in some of these like presidential debates. Have something like come out of nowhere to startle them and see how they react.
Yeah. Boo.
Yeah.
Which one in the box pops
Which
up.
one hits the ground and hides under the table, and which one like looks around like, where's the danger? I'll take it on. All right. Well, I think that's a pretty good summary of that election period.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, let's go on to our movie segment, and the movie we're discussing is Mission Impossible 3.
Yes.
So, Mike, there's been 7 Mission Impossible films. I mean,
wow.
I think there's one being wrapped up right now. So let's just say there's 8. And this is the last one that had a number. There was Mission Impossible 2, and then Mission Impossible 3, and then after that, they all just had little names.
I see.
Mission Impossible, Rogue Nation. But this is the last one with a number. Some people might say, well, why didn't you pick Mission Impossible 1? Well, I have to give some cred to that for being the first film for kicking off the franchise. And by the way, the Mission Impossible franchise has earned over $4 billion.
Wow.
Which is impressive. And in today's money, that's $4 billion. When the first film came out, a lot of people thought that it was insulting to the original television series because it really shifted things around. It made the main guy from the original TV series, it made him the bad guy. But it was very well received, the movie, enough to spawn the sequel. And by the way, that Mission Impossible 2, that has to be one of the worst sequels in film history.
Yep.
I mean, it is a horrible film. It's so bad that, I own all the other Mission Impossible films in Blu-ray, except that one I refuse to add to my collection. It's just flat out horrible. Although, I will tell you that in Mission Impossible 2, there's an opening sequence where he does some rock climbing.
Oh.
And it's filmed really, really well. And Tom Cruise, as you know, does, a lot of his own stunts. And he actually is a rock climber, and he did the rock climbing sequence.
Yeah.
But I will also say that if you enjoyed that rock climbing sequence, Mike, if you really want to see a great rock climbing in a film, I recommend the Eiger Sanction with Clint Eastwood.
Okay.
From the 70s.
Let me write that down.
Yeah. That has some tremendous rock climbing. And at least one person died in that film because of the rock climbing sequences. All right, so why Mission Impossible 3? And what does this have to do with Bill Clinton? Well, I'll just say that, in my opinion, MI3 was really the pivotal film in the whole franchise, which turned it back on track after the horrible second film, and put the whole franchise into high gear. Mike, I sort of look at Bill Clinton doing that back in that, that was a pivotal political time where Clinton came into power and shifted the country into this whole high gear, I think.
Okay.
All right. Some other interesting things about this film. It was directed by J.J. Abrams.
Okay. Yeah.
This is the only Mission Impossible film that he directed, but he's been known for directing other films, including the Star Trek reboot.
Yes.
Some Star Wars, some of the recent Star Wars films, and then TV shows, hit TV shows like Lost and Alias.
That's a good resume.
Yeah, it's really. Have you ever seen Alias?
Yeah. Jennifer Garner?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
you got to love Jennifer Garner. And Bradley Cooper was in that.
Oh, interesting.
It was one of his first things. Tom Cruise actually hired J.J. Abrams. He had binge watched Alias.
Oh.
And loved it and said, I want that guy.
Would you recommend binge watching Alias?
I think I would. I mean, it's got a lot of good aspects to it, and if J.J. Abrams gives it a thumbs up, who am I to argue?
Okay, always looking for something to stream.
Some other interesting things about the film: it stars Simon Pegg.
Okay.
Well, maybe I shouldn't use the phrase "it stars." Simon Pegg is in it. I love Simon Pegg. He brings a great aspect to the film franchise, and he first comes in Mission Impossible 3, but then I think he's in every single film after that.
Oh.
Yeah. And one of the things I love about his character throughout the films, right, is he is so excited about masks.
Masks.
I liked that thing with Philip Seymour Hoffman's character in the movie.
Yeah.
I thought that was like a fun little sequence, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're right. And that was one of the frequent things in the TV show, is how they would put on a disguise and infiltrate.
Oh.
Which would include a mask and adjusting your voice to whoever you're trying to impersonate.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, Simon Pegg in all of these Mission Impossible films, he can't wait to generate a mask.
Oh.
Anyway, and
do you think that technology is real?
I do. Yeah, I do think that they can make really lifelike masks.
What they did with the Philip Seymour Hoffman character, I thought it was funny because you didn't know. Okay, is this Philip Seymour Hoffman or is it Tom Cruise dressed like Philip Seymour Hoffman?
Exactly.
Yes. They had to use that wine stain to let you know.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yes, good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about Philip Seymour Hoffman. I think that he just did a tremendous job. He plays a wonderful villain in the film.
Yeah.
The way he delivers his lines, he just has a calm, menacing demeanor.
Oh, he's a bad guy. You don't like him from from the opening.
Yeah.
That was pretty horrible with the. Should I give anything away here? But the.
Well,
torture.
I think we can. Let's talk briefly about the opening. That opening sequence. I mean, it just jumps right into it.
It does. It does.
It's like a 3-minute scene with Tom Cruise, and I have to tell you, he gets me in that scene. Tom Cruise is a real actor. A lot of people just think of him in the Mission Impossible, but he's won Academy Awards or an award. He's been in film since he was like a teenager. I mean, he is a qualified actor. And that 3 minutes in the beginning of Mission Impossible 3, in my opinion, that's Oscar worthy. If it wasn't in a Mission Impossible film, if he had done that scene in Ordinary People or something like that, that's Oscar worthy.
It would have been a little out of context in Ordinary People, I think. But
I mean, the emotion he brings to that scene is just...
No, it's good. You're right.
And Philip Seymour Hoffman, I mean, he's great. So
no,
Hoffman,
he's evil. He's evil. What are you talking about? I hate him.
Oh, Hoffman is evil. He's a wonderful villain. And you know what I love is how in the end of the film he gets, dispatched by Cruise, and all that's left is a shoe.
Just to note, though, that Philip Seymour Hoffman, it's a loss to the entertainment world that he's not around anymore. It's sad. He was great. He was a great comic actor. He did so many things good, so many things well.
He really did. He really did. Yeah, it's definitely a loss. And this role is one of my favorite memories of his performances. Mm-hmm. And speaking of performances, I'll also note that Ving Rhames.
Yeah,
Ving Rhames. He's been in every Mission Impossible film.
Oh, so. Yeah.
And it's a nice homage that they pay to the original Mission Impossible series by having an African American, play that technician, that computer person role. Because in the original TV series, they kind of broke ground by having an African American play this, this pivotal role where he was, like a super tech genius. And that actor. Back in that TV series, I mean, he was really well respected. He was like the Sidney Poitier of TV.
Wow.
They call me Mr. Tibbs.
When were those made?
That's a good question. Frenchie, when were those? When were those early Mission Impossible TV shows those made? Oh, Frenchie's chiming in. It ran from 1966 to 1973.
Oh.
And then Lawrence Fishburne, he plays a role in this film.
Yeah.
Great job. I think, as we've mentioned in the past, he's got a great voice due to his stage work. It's really on display here. I mean, I love when he is towering over Tom Cruise and has him as a captive. And he says, if there's one thing that will make me lose sleep over, and I love my sleep. Just the way he delivers these lines. And he says, I kid you not, I will bleed on the flag to keep the stripes red. I keep waiting for some political candidate, Mike, at some point to make statements like that. Vote for me and I'll bleed on the flag to keep it red. Yeah, but Lawrence Fishburne does a great job. And then here's another interesting thing. In the film, Tom Cruise has a brother-in-law played by Aaron Paul from Breaking Bad.
Right.
And it's funny because you watch the movie and I don't even recognize that it's Aaron Paul. As soon as he started to speak, my brain registered, I know that voice, but I can't put it to the face. And then, I had to look it up and it's Aaron Paul.
Yeah, Mr. White.
So another thing that I like about Tom Cruise in a lot of these films is he's just a master at nonverbal acting. Mm-hmm. There's so many scenes where just he's giving a look or a physical response. In the end scene where he walks into this room full of old Chinese men playing like mahjong, and he's just the looks he gives to them, and they don't even say a word. It's just he just does great scenes, nonverbal scenes, and in a bunch of the Mission Impossible movies, you can see him give a shrug or a look, a glance to certain people, and just a motion with his head. And I don't know, I just really appreciate his overall acting. Another nice aspect in this film, Mike, is the lip reading.
Okay.
I like how they have, Ethan Hunt, Tom Cruise's character. By the way, good thing they didn't name him Mark. Ethan Hunt, he can read lips. And they show that in the start of the film, his ability to read lips. And then they use it really nicely later in the film.
Oh.
I don't think he uses that skill in any other Mission Impossible film, but I think they should, they should squeeze that in if they can. Now, Mission Impossible 3, I wouldn't say it's the best film in the series.
Nope.
To be honest, in my opinion, I think the one that comes right after, Ghost Protocol, I think that's the best one.
Okay.
But Mission Impossible 3, it's like a solid, third best in the series. But we can cover things that happen in some of these other ones, and I'll just note that Tom Cruise doing his own stunts, of course, everyone talks about that.
Yeah.
And it is absolutely impressive. And I love watching him and knowing that it's him doing a lot of these stunts.
Yeah.
So there's so many good scenes, and I love that they go on location, of course, and film these. So, they're at the Vatican filming a bunch of things there. And then, of course, when they depict inside the Vatican, I'm sure that's a set, but did you notice, did it make you wonder why the inside of the Vatican has so many security guards and computer technicians with all kinds of screens and computer servers?
Yeah. They've got cameras and everything everywhere.
Yeah. And then, stunts, when people think of Tom Cruise doing stunts, of course it can be driving a motorcycle off a cliff, right?
Yep.
But it's not all stunts are not obvious stunts. For example, he does a sequence in Shanghai in the end where he is running over rooftops and navigating his way through the city. And then
Isn't that how everybody gets around Shanghai?
Yeah. Well, rooftop is it's a crowded city, so rooftops can be a nice way. And then he gets into a breakaway sprint where he sprints for like 3/4 of a mile alongside a river, and they do a great job of filming him in that run. Yeah. And you might not think of it as a stunt, but that is a very respectable effort. Doing a 3/4 mile sprint, and his running form is great.
That boy sure is a running fool.
And then there's a scene where in Shanghai again, where he does a fulcrum swing, where he runs off a roof and then tied to a cord that swings him over to another roof. Now, they didn't really film that, live in a Shanghai building, but they built a huge set. He actually is jumping off some really high structure and getting swung. And then they, CGI the whole thing on a green screen so it looks like he's in Shanghai. The thing that I love about, prior to that scene, Tom Cruise is with his team and he's specking out on a window. He's like using a crayon on a window as to how they're going to get into the building, right?
Yeah.
And he's drawing the buildings and he's calculating the distances. And then and he's drawing up like quadratic equations on the window with a crayon. So I'm just thinking, my God, this guy can read lips, he can sprint for 3/4 of a mile, and he can write quadratic equations. So that's impressive. And then one other mini stunt, Mike, that you or any of the listeners can do at home is in the end where he's tied to a chair and they're grilling him, right? He's captive.
Yep.
And they say, give us what we want, and he says, I need to hear my wife's voice to know she's safe first. And so the guy says, okay, yeah, no problem. He pulls out his cell phone, calls a number, holds the cell phone up to Tom Cruise's ear, right?
Yeah.
And then Tom Cruise bites the guy's hand, which startles him, headbutts him, and then steals his pen to unlock his cuffs.
Wow.
And now that scene, the hand that he bit was his own. So apparently it was difficult to kind of film it with someone else holding the phone up. So Tom Cruise actually used his own hand and held the phone up to his own face. And then when it called for it, he bit his own hand.
Ouch.
Yes. So there you go. That's a stunt that anybody can do in the privacy of their own home.
When was this film, Doug? When did this?
2006. Interestingly, the Mission Impossible franchise is spread out over a very long time. I mean, it's spread out over like 30 years, to be honest. The first one was in 96.
Wow.
And it took 4 years to make the second. And then it took 6 years to release the third. So they really do take their time. They're not just rushing these films out to make $1 on the franchise. All right, Mike. Well, I think our mission to create this episode has completed itself.
Yes, we accepted that mission, and looks like we have completed it.
For all of us here at Politics in a Movie, thank you for listening, and you can check out our website at politicsinAmovie.com. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Frenchie.
This recording will self-destruct in 5 seconds.